encouraging, for I knew now that there were also people on the outside who were willing to go to bat for me, people who were interested enough to want to help, such as Judge Victor and Reverends Bill and Bob Denton. I appeared before the Parole Board in July of 1967. 2 weeks later, I found out that my parole had been granted and would be effective as of September of 1967. I was a very happy person. Now all I could do was sit back and anticipate what would happen when I was released. I would go to the Denton house to live, but Reverend Denton wouldn't have to find me a job because about a week before I went before the Parole Board, I met a fellow in the institution who was able to arrange to get me a job. This fellow was another inmate and a friend of mine who happened to know a couple people who did a lot of hiring, so he went to bat for me. I received a telegram from Akron, Ohio, shortly afterward, stating that upon my release from prison, I would have a job. When I was released, I went to the Denton house to live. I went to work as a dockman for Mr. Harold Shantz of Shantz Cartage in Akron, Ohio. Mr. Shantz is probably one of the most wonderful people I have ever met. He gave me a good paying job and loaned me money when I needed it. He even arranged for me to get a car. He helped in every way possible. To this day I still work for him, although at the present time I am off work because I injured my back and my neck in April of 1970 when I fell approximately 25 feet from a part of the building in which I was living. By the grace of God, I was able to live through that fall. While riding the bus back and forth to work, I met a young lady who was going to the University of Akron, studying to become a school teacher. I got to know her quite well. After 2 weeks of riding the bus with her, I bought an automobile and started taking her to school every morning on my way to work. In late September of 1967, I met this young lady, and in December of 1967, I gave her an engagement ring. I told her all about myself before we were engaged, but not before she had the chance to know me. I did not tell her about my past right away, because she may have had a tendency to prejudge me, like so many other people prejudge others. We were married in July of 1968. At this time, we have 2 children, a daughter 2 years old and a son 1 year old. I love my wife and children dearly. My wife, through the grace of God, is really responsible for my being able to remain a free man and to be able to do the right thing. For it is she who is there at my every turn and step. I love my children very much. I tell them every day that I love them, and I take the time every day to play with them. Things in our home are never taken for granted. One day in 1969, because of my past record, I was approached by an associate professor affiliated with the University of Akron and asked if I would be interested in addressing a group, a committee, known as the Betterment for the Ohio Penitentiary. I told him that I would be glad to, although I didn't know what I could do for them. After this meeting, I met a doctor of sociology. He started talking about writing books, for he is the author of a textbook being used at the University of Akron where he teaches. So again, I had found somebody building a fire in me and getting me interested in doing something. He pointed out that if I wrote a book, I might be able to help other people and be able to point out the pitfalls in life and the consequences of committing crimes and how easy it is to get into reformatories and penitentiaries and how hard it is to get out once you get in and what the conditions inside the penitentiaries are like. He also pointed out that I could talk to people, parents around the country, about the lack of communication between the parent and the child. After I started writing this book, I became more involved in community affairs. I started teaching first aid for the American Red Cross and lecturing to various junior and senior high schools about crime. I then got the idea of forming the club known as the WWTH, which means We Want to Help. The reason for this club is to help others. I have a post office box where people may write to me about their problems, or to express their feelings about what I have to say. For someone to write to me, they first must be interested and have the time. If they can give me their time and that much interest, then the least I can do is answer their letter. WWTH is a non-profit organization intended to do just what it says, help others. If people are interested enough to write to me about my program, then I know these same people are interested in helping others. It's not hard to find someone who has a problem and needs some advice. Even the Boy Scouts are taught to do a good deed every day. This is the whole function of the club, WWTH. Get involved. Look around you. Look for people who you can help. Naturally, there isn't much recognition for doing this, but then you are being watched, and you will gain some recognition, because it is a fact that God's watching you. Get involved. Become a member. Look around and help others. This is what is meant when I say, build a fire in a person and not under him. We taxpayers should start building a fire in a lot of people and not under them. The people I'm speaking of right now are those responsible for our prison reform. We, as taxpayers, have to support prisoners, whether it is their first or 50th time in the penitentiary. If this is the case, why not put our money to work for those in the penitentiary? I'm not talking about giving them wall-to-wall carpeting. Since we have to pay to keep them there, why not use our money for such things as getting trained personnel in the penitentiary and putting in a rehabilitation program? Then the inmates can get an education and learn a trade such as barbering, radio and television repair, typewriter repair, shoemaking, tailoring, drafting, construction work, and other similar trades. If we get interested enough to find out where our money is going, then I'm quite sure that in the long run we will have men and women coming out of the penitentiary who will have an education and know a trade. Therefore, they will be able to go to work and help relieve us of the burden of supporting the men and women in the penitentiary. We must also be willing to give ex-cons a chance to prove themselves. Don't prejudge them just because you happen to know someone who was a victim of a theft or a burglar. Give them a chance. After all, we are paying the taxes to keep him in there, and it certainly doesn't make much sense to pay to educate them and get them out and then turn around and try to put them back in because we don't trust them, because we want to prejudge them. People who prejudge ex-convicts are responsible in a lot of cases for them returning to the penitentiary. It is a proven fact that more state prisoners return to penitentiaries than federal prisoners, because in your state penitentiaries there are not any rehabilitation programs to speak of. Prisoners make license plates, but if they get out of the penitentiary and start making them, they will be taken to court, tried and convicted, and sent back to the penitentiary. This is not the type of rehabilitation that I am talking about. On the state level, most of the men hired as guards are of very little use to anyone. It is the only type of work they could find. It was their last resort. A lot of them do not have a high school education, and a few of them do not have an elementary education. To them, being a prison guard means working 8 hours a day, making sure that you do not escape, making sure you do not smoke when they are not supposed to smoke, and making sure you do not talk when you are not supposed to. They look forward to only two things: the hour when they will go home and the day they will get paid. It is much different in your federal penitentiaries. Here, rehabilitation is the program of the day. When a guard goes to work in one of the federal penitentiaries, he first must have a high school education, and many of them must have a college education. All the time they are working for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they stay on one job only 3 months and then rotate to another job. This enables them to get to know all of the jobs within the institution and the men and women in the penitentiary. These guards are instructed to go to the administration office and read various men's records so that they might find out something about the person, such as what type of personality does he have, what kind of a home background does he have, and what types of crimes has he committed. By reading these records, the guards are able many times to spot a man's problem and to help him. In your federal institutions, there is also a lot of incentive for the guards. For every warden of a federal penitentiary, including the director of the Bureau of Prisons, was at one time a guard who had to work his way up. Again, it boils down to what I have been saying. Build a fire in a person and not under him. How can you help the man when he is released from the penitentiary? As I said, do not prejudge him. Give him a chance. Should you see him doing something that you feel is wrong, it's not really necessary that you call up the man's parole officer to report every minor infraction. Let me tell you what happened to me not too long ago. I was supposed to lecture at a nearby college, and a young lady was supposed to call me to set a time for this lecture. The day she called, I was out of town, and my wife answered the phone. There was a lot of static and crackling noise on our end of the phone, and all my wife managed to hear was that this young lady was a college student and that she wanted to talk to me. My wife can remember the girl asking, "What is all that noise?" and then the phones went dead. What actually happened was our area telephones were out of order because men were working on the cables. I was told about the call and just assumed that it was the girl who was supposed to contact me in regards to my lecturing at her college, and I figured she would call back. About 2 days later, after I got back in town, I called a friend of mine and found out that my parole officer had been trying to get in touch with me. So I called him. He told me that a young lady had called his office and said she felt her voice was being recorded over my telephone, so she was not going to call me again in regards to the lecture. Here is what could have happened. When I found out that my parole officer wanted to talk to me, I could have become quite worried whether I did something wrong or not. The fear of maybe doing or saying something wrong and the fear of returning to a penitentiary could have been so great that I could have exaggerated things so much that I could have packed up my clothes and left. In doing so, I would have violated my parole and later be caught and returned to the penitentiary. But why? Because someone out there felt that it was necessary to harass me by calling my parole officer or maybe my wife and telling them things that were thought to be true. Give the people who are being released from the penitentiary a halfway chance to at least prove themselves. Now, I am not saying that every person released from the penitentiary is going to remain a free man or a free woman. What I am saying is that if you are willing to give this person a chance in life, if you are willing to step forward and offer this person assistance, to show this person that you sincerely care, not only will you find another friend and be helping someone who is down on their luck and doesn't really know which way to turn, but you will also find that by building a fire in that person and not under him, that you will be able to look at yourself in a mirror at night and like what you see. When you go to bed at night, you will be able to get a good night's sleep without being perturbed at yourself for the little wrong incidents that day. Why not be one of God's helpers and help those around you who are in need of your help? You'll never be sorry for it, and the reward will be tremendous. There is an old saying which goes like this: don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. One day you may need help. Should this be the case, do you know where it will come from? Have you helped others? Give what I have just said a try. Won't you please? I am sure that if you will love it. Thank you very much, and this is Ed Edwards.